Welcome to our second breakout session of the day. Linda Bruno is here with us. She's been developing and conducting training workshops for libraries and other organizations for more than 15 years. She offers workshops on topics ranging from leadership skills to emotional intelligence and lots of areas in between. Linda received her MBA from the University of Florida and has years of experience in hands-on management positions. She is also certified with DDI and Achieve Global. She develops her workshops based on solid research and, more importantly, real life application. We're very happy to have another Linda breakout session for our conference, and I think time management is an excellent one to add to this one. So welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much, Kelly, and thanks for inviting me to do this today. I have to share that I'm looking at this slide thinking when Kelly first asked me and I started to develop the program and did this first slide, I didn't even realize what everybody else was going to talk about, and yet it fits right into what Catherine talked about with goals and what Diana talked about if you were in her session with the applications of the tools that we have available to us, the little timetable there on the left. So I want to start out by reading something, a couple things that came across my desk as I was developing this program, and they really hit me of how they could be applicable to what we're talking about today. The first one is from Seth Godin, and he's considered a thought leader in things like marketing and just he has real deep philosophical thoughts about life sometimes. He calls this the trap of busy. Everyone who wants to be busy is busy, but not everyone is productive. Busy is simply a series of choices about how to spend the next minute. Wow. Productive requires skill, persistence, and good judgment. Productive means that you have created something of value. Perhaps your self created busyness is causing you to be less productive. Yikes. And then, from a novel of all things, while I was developing the program, there was a statement that said, we waste time and we want more of it simultaneously, yet we rarely spend it wisely. We often simply squander it. And then later in that same book, it said, I think we're searching for our lost time. We won't ever find it, but that doesn't stop us from hunting for all of our lost hours. So I really thought those were very appropriate to what we're talking about today. And as Kelly mentioned, if you'll look on the portal, the Feedloop portal, there is a section under my speaker portion that talks about files, and that's where you'll find today's handouts. I highly encourage you to either have them open as a second screen so that you can follow along, or to print them off if you can, because there's some information we simply will not have time to go into in depth and go through slide by slide. So I've included it here so that you can reflect on it when we're done here. I'm trying to manage our time efficiently as we go through this particular session. So the first thing I want to talk about are the time robbers. That's kind of what we just talked about in those first couple of readings. It can be one of the most important things you can do to manage your time is just to become aware of those time robbers and then decide what you're going to do about them. You know, real robbers break in, and if we don't take steps to overcome that, they'll break in again. They'll be repeat offenders, and I don't want that to happen for you with the time robbers in your life. So on page 1 of your handouts, you will find that it just asks you the simple question, which of the items shown on page 1 of your handout rob you of your time on a typical day? And just type the top one, if you would, into the chat box. And Kelly's going to transfer those over to Zoom for me so I can see them in my chat box, because you need to recognize that first before you will ever be able to overcome it. And if you didn't happen to be able to print your handouts or access them for some reason, I'm just going to go through a few of them. There are many, and the reason I have many on there is those are the ones that people have told me over the years take too much time. And I won't read all of them, but I will hit on some highlights. Personal visitors. People say, I always have people stop to visit me. And I asked one lady, I said, do you have candy on your desk? And she kind of grinned and she said, yeah. And I said, well, I'm going to come by and visit too. So sometimes we have control over some of these things, don't we? So personal visitors, chit chat. I want you to be friendly. I want you to build good relationships and have rapport with people. But we know when we overdo that and we're robbing ourselves of time, don't we? Lack of planning, obligations you should not have taken on, period. You know when you're doing it, it's not going to be good for you because you're not going to have time to do everything well. And as Diana mentioned earlier, you cannot multitask effectively. Studies are now showing that. And I knew it all along. I could fold laundry and watch TV, and that's about as far as it went. So be sure that you are paying attention to the obligations you're taking on. A disorganized work area might be your problem area. Social networking. I talked to so many people. Some have actually removed themselves from that just because they recognized it was a time drain for them. But even those who don't recognize it, typically they can get, go down that rabbit hole of social networking. Surf, just plain old surfing on the internet. You can spend hours doing that. Maybe it's boredom that robs you of time. And what I mean by that is whatever you happen to be working on that still needs done at some point, you're bored with it. So you decide to go do something that's not going to be productive. You will be busy, as Seth Godin says, but you won't be productive. So if you think any of those might hit you, your awareness is going to be key for you getting anything out of today's session on time management. So if I didn't go over one of the things that seems to rob you of time, go ahead and type what it is in the chat box. If I didn't happen to hit on it, or if I did, because if you're in this session today, there's something that you feel is taking away time that you need for something else. What would that be? Putting out fires. Yeah, Christine. And you don't have a lot of control over that. Thank you, Kelly, for pasting those. But what I want you to hear about the putting out fires is try to be aware if they're the same fires over and over again. Think of this. If I have an electrical cord too close to the burner on my stove and it lights a fire, and I put the fire out, but tomorrow the electrical cord is still there, guess what? I'm going to have another fire, aren't I? So if you've got duplicated issues, try to pinpoint those and reduce them somewhat. You won't ever eliminate them, will you? Because putting out fires is part of living the library life. So be aware of that. You won't eliminate them, but you certainly can reduce them if you're paying attention to the ones that are duplicates. And rarely do I find a situation where every single fire is absolutely unique in and of itself. So try to reduce that a bit. And Marcia said distractions. Okay, so then the next step for us, I'm going to use a bit of what Catherine was talking about this morning with goal setting is if we know that we have distractions and that's our problem, what might the solution be to that? Well, to become aware of what distractions are happening and pick just one to start out with and then try to lessen the distraction. You will hear me say many times, I'm not asking for perfection. It's sort of like Diana said earlier, give yourself some slack on these things, but try to make progress because that's where you will notice improvement in your time management. And when you make improvement in any area of your life, it motivates you and gives you momentum to keep moving forward. So, Marcia, I'm going to challenge you to pick one of those distractions and see if you can lessen it. And Tracy said email. And Tracy, if you happened to be in Diana's session earlier, I was going, yes, when she said, turn off your notifications. You'll see that later today in my session. I've actually got it written in my handouts to turn off your notifications. First time I ever said that right after email was introduced. We weren't even talking about time management. We were talking about organizational skills. And I mentioned that looked like that could be a problem area for somebody. And a lady in the room said, she said, I'm never going to be able to deal with my email. And I said, why is that? I said, do you have one of the alert bells? At that time, it was the little bell that went off. And she said, oh, yes. And I said, then turn it off. And she went, oh, I can't do that. And I said, what did you do before you had email? So, we make excuses, don't we? Good, Tracy Ann. I'm so glad to hear that. That's exactly what we need to do. And you know what, Tracy Ann, if you don't get anything else out of the entire conference, now I know Kelly wants you to get a whole lot more than that out of this, but just the fact that you did that during Diana's session made your day worthwhile, didn't it? Because I promise you it will help. And like Diana said, I'm not going to tell you to just check it once a day or whatever, but if you're checking it every 5 or 10 minutes, it's not as bad as your cell phone being next to you because I'm aware of that study that Diana was telling us about, but it's the same kind of feeling we get. We get a hit almost of oxytocin because it makes us feel good that somebody wants us. So if we turn off that alert and we're not constantly checking it, that will be helpful to us. So another comment I saw on an e-newsletter that I got from somebody, it just said, what we believe about being busy forms what we do about being busy. So guess what? If I tell myself day in and day out, I'm so busy, I've got way too much to do, I'll never get all this done, then I give myself an excuse not to get all this done, don't I? It's amazing how we talk to ourselves. So, one of the things I don't think we give as much time to as we maybe could, as far as being a time robber, and that is a procrastinator. And we all do it to some extent. But the danger, we're going to talk about the danger of that in a minute. There are many reasons to really try to overcome that because it is a time waster. It steals our time from us. It sounds like it shouldn't. We're putting something off, no big deal, we'll do it later. But we'll look at that in a moment. So let's first of all look at why do we even do it? It's unpleasant. I don't wanna do it. I've caught myself doing that. Any of you who've been in any of my programs know that I'm always honest with you about the areas that I fall down in, and typically those are the ones I develop programs on because I need to be reminded of it. It might be an unpleasant task. I love research. I love sharing this information with you. But when it actually gets down to putting my notes into a handout, which I love the tool of the handout, and I've had many people tell me how useful that is, but the actual typing part of that, the admin part of that, is kind of unpleasant. So I can find myself putting that off, and it doesn't serve me well to do that. It's boring. Yep, I've got parts of my job that are boring. How about you? Does it get less boring if you put it off? I don't think so. So let's just get it over with. A lack of skills. And again, think about the reasons we give, which are really just excuses that we put something off. If it's a lack of skills, I'm likely not going to develop my skills between now and the time this has to be done. So if I just find the information I need to proceed, I'm going to be a lot more productive at that. A fear of failure, and I have those little three dots there. It might be a fear of success because what happens when we do something really well and we're successful at it is guess what? We get more work, we get more responsibility. And sometimes that's a good thing, but if we do that a lot, we start to feel like we're almost being picked on, don't we? So instead of moving forward on this project, I'll just put it off for a little while because I really don't want to get another project right now. So fear of failure or success. Too much to do. Yes, period, the end. We could all say this, but I want you to hear this statement that I read a couple of years ago. The word rationalize means we're telling ourselves rational lies. Did you catch that? And we rationalize not doing what needs done by telling ourselves a rational lie that we have too much to do, and that's why we don't get anything done. We're not being fair to ourselves when we do that, folks. So, yeah, we all have too much to do. And we're going to address a couple of ways to handle that a little bit later. As Diana was saying to me earlier, she said, I need to learn how to say no. And that's one of the things we're going to talk about. We have plenty of time until we don't. And that's when we start to feel the stress and the pressure because we've procrastinated. It's a habit. You heard, if you were in Diana's session, I know some of you were not, but if you heard Diana speak, she was talking about habits and how we need to overcome those habits by replacing them with other habits. So if you have a habit of first thing in the morning when you come in, you spend 15 minutes just sort of piddling around, my mom would have called it. Not really being productive, not really, getting anything done that needs to be done for the day, but it's just kind of how you settle in. That's a habit. Let's say we cut that down to 5 minutes and we take that first 10 minutes to review our to do list or to make our to do list. And we keep doing that and we keep doing that. And then pretty soon we're kind of addicted to our, I hear you, Diana. She's the queen of that. We're kind of addicted to our to do list at that point, which is a good thing. We've now replaced the 10, 15, 20 minutes, whatever it is, where we're just kind of, you know, chilling out with part of that, I didn't say all of it, but part of it being used to get ourselves ready for the day. We just create a new habit to replace the first one. Because when we allow being busy and what we think about being busy to form our thoughts about being busy, we also kill our goals that Catherine was talking about earlier. Because if we've got in our mind that, oh, I set this goal at the TBLC goals conference, but I just don't have time to work on it. Well, we've told ourselves we will never accomplish that goal. So we need to be real careful of that. So sometimes I will admit that procrastination is a good thing. I just don't want you to use it as an excuse, but these are very legitimate reasons to procrastinate, and I have used them all very effectively. I have also caught myself almost going on the verge of using them as an excuse and having to pull back and say, no, I just need to go ahead and do this. The first one is incubate and create. And I learned the term actually from my husband when he was teaching college. He had a student that was late with her paper. And he asked her why. She had 6 weeks to do it. And she said, "Well, I incubate and create." And he said, "That's baloney," is what he said to me. I said, "No, I think the phrase is very accurate because I do a lot of that for all of my programs." But she used it as an excuse to go from having 6 weeks to do something to not getting it done on time at all. So that's where that fine line comes in, isn't it? But I incubate and create for my programs all the time, and it's very effective for me. I just have to make sure I don't push the limit to where it's next week on my calendar and I haven't worked on it yet. For me, sometimes it's an energy surge. I heard Diana say, I found out I was a morning person. I'm what I call a mid morning person. I'm not a 6 o'clock in the morning person. I'm about a 10 o'clock in the morning person, but I need that energy surge. And on the flip side of that, if I wait too long during the day to do something that really needs some good focus and good brain energy, if I wait too long in the day to do that, I'm not effective. So you need to know when your energy surges are on the things that are going to take some focus and some deeper thought and so forth. I always tell people when you don't have an energy surge, that's a great time to check your email, to clean out your email folders, to do those kinds of things that are going to need done eventually as well, but they don't take that brain power that you might need for something else. The timing is off. And that absolutely happens sometimes. I may be starting to I'm working on a project right now that doesn't actually have a due date except my own that I've established for me. When I get busy with something else right in the middle of a project like that, I have to set the project aside because the timing is off to work on that particular project. Something else is taking priority. So understand if you've got something that needs to take priority, even though you're right in the middle of it and you want to get it finished, maybe the timing is off to do that. And then sometimes it's just your intuition. I had a client years ago before I started working exclusively with libraries, and she was at a university and she actually had a corporate training department that she managed. And she would hire me and some of my friends as corporate trainers at that time. And she called me and she said, "Oh, I've got this great program and these people want to do this and put together an outline." I was excited too. So I put together the outline. She said, "We'll want to do this on a pretty quick turnaround. You might want to put together some notes." And I started to put together the notes the next day and I thought, something tells me that I'm going to spend a lot of energy putting something together here and it's not going to actually happen. So I thought, I'm just going to wait a couple of days and see what falls out from this. And sure enough, it was about actually a week later, and I had jotted down some general notes, but nothing real deep. And she emailed me and she said, "I'm sorry that fell through. They did not get their funding." We all know how that is, don't we? So somehow my intuition told me that. And luckily, I was able to spend that productive time on something else during that period. So why is it a big deal? I told you I was going to tell you this. I want to give you a reason that if you are a procrastinator, and honestly, we all are to some extent, if this is an area where you could create some new habits, why do you need to bother with that? It wastes time. Now that sounds counterintuitive, doesn't it? Except that while you're procrastinating, that thing still needs to be done. And that thing hanging over your head is draining some of your energy, meaning you're not as productive with whatever you currently are working on, or you're trying to multitask the both of them, which isn't productive. We know we lose time when we do that, as Diana said earlier. Missed opportunities. This is huge. This has never happened to me because I'm extremely aware of this. I happen to be self-employed, so I don't want to miss any opportunities, but I know very well how it could happen. And here's what could happen, and it might happen to you. I'll just use you as an example. Let's say you've got a project that's due July 1st. That's a long way away. I got plenty of time, right? Isn't that one of our reasons? I'm going to put that off. Okay, it's a pretty big project. Yeah, look at it June 1st. I still got 4 or 5 weeks. I'm good. I keep working on other stuff that is more interesting or I feel more knowledgeable about it. I feel more secure in it. And lo and behold, a week before it's due, something else really exciting comes along and I have to turn it down because now I only have 1 week left to do that project that I had 6 weeks to do originally. So missed opportunities is a huge one. Don't do that to yourself. Don't shoot yourself in the foot for the possibility of getting new responsibilities or new authority at your job or new exciting creative challenges because you procrastinated something too much. So missed opportunities is a big one. Poor performance, that goes without saying. You don't do it as people say, I work well under pressure. No, you just work faster. There may be the rare bird that works well under pressure all the time. But again, studies show that what really happens is you do work quicker and you get it done, but you're not giving your best performance. And of course, it's increased stress. Even if you tell yourself you work better under pressure, it's still the stress of the pressure, isn't it? And that drains energy. I don't know about you, but there's plenty of things in my life that drain energy. Sometimes when I don't sleep as well as I would like to, or I'm not eating as well as I should, or whatever. So this will drain your energy as well. So just think about how you know you're procrastinating because it's that awareness piece I was talking about earlier. How can you tell when you're procrastinating? And here are some hints for you. You do the little things. Now, I did hear mention that sometimes it just feels good to check off the little things, the 2 minute thing, which I totally agree with. But if you're doing that all the time while those bigger things are lingering and they're getting transferred to your to do list every day because you haven't made any progress, that might be a sign that you're actually procrastinating. You go over completed work, just want to make sure this is right. And many of us in this room have a bit of perfectionist in us. So again, we use that as an excuse, don't we? I just need to make sure everything's spelled right. I just need to make sure everything's lined up, whatever. But I've done that 4 times already. I think I can go ahead and birth that baby and move on to the next project. Starting and stopping something. You start the project, "Oh, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm bored. I don't have the energy," whatever it is. I stop. I go back and start it again tomorrow. Very unproductive. Your brain doesn't know which way it's supposed to go. Having a birthday party. And what I mean by that, go ahead and have all the birthday parties you want for people's birthdays. But when you're having birthday parties for things you should be working on, that's a signal. Whether it's a 1 week birthday party or it's been on your list for 3 months, that's a signal you're procrastinating. Step back and figure out why and how are you going to move forward. And saying yes to everything else. Diana, this one's for you. What are you putting off because you're saying yes to everything else? Or what are you having to turn down later because you're saying yes to everything else? So that's a signal you might be procrastinating. This is a signal you might be procrastinating. When I pulled that up, I went, oh, I remember I put that in as a slide. This is when I procrastinate. And I will tell you, I also use this as a mental break, but I have limited myself to 3 games, which usually takes less than 2 or 3 minutes because I'm pretty quick at it. And if I find myself going past that, then I know I'm procrastinating. Maybe for you, it's a video game. Maybe for you, it's Candy Crush or some of the other ones that have been out there for a long time, Best Fiends or whatever, all Words with Friends, whatever those things are. It's fun to do those things, but when we are doing them and they are draining our time, then we need to be aware of that, don't we? Stop it. Just stop it. I don't usually share with people that I do this. It's usually top secret, but I wanted you to know it has happened to me before. So, how do we overcome it? I've told you why we need to overcome it. I've given you tips on how to recognize it. You got to make a choice, folks. Remember, what we believe about being busy forms what we do about being busy. That's a choice, isn't it? So you need to create a new habit today and decide, I know I procrastinate in this area. I'm going to take one step to lessen that procrastination. Use your to-do list. I don't mean you have to rewrite it every day and take the first 47 minutes of every day to redo your to-do list. I just mean if it's written down somewhere or it's on an app, I have to use physical writing on paper. It's the way I process things. I'm a visual person. I've got to have it in front of me. An app telling me something's coming because I can dismiss that so easily doesn't work for me. So I think Diana mentioned earlier as well, use systems that work for you, not the ones that are written in books or told to you by Linda Bruno or even Diana, because we both know, Diana and I, that we need to find the tools that work for us. So use some sort of to-do list so that you keep on track of things. And if you were in Kathy's session this morning, that Catherine's session, the keynote, she mentioned this. She didn't word it this way, but it's exactly what she described. Work backward in your calendar. Yes, you put the note of when it's due. But if you're really committed to doing something about this, you put a note when it's due before it's actually due. Not to trick yourself, but you make the commitment to yourself that it's due on Friday. I need to have it to Kelly on Friday, but I need to make sure I have it done by Wednesday. So if there's a technology glitch or anything else, or some other thought comes into mind, I have time to make adjustments. So work backward. When I'm doing a program, I sometimes work a year backward in my calendar. And it's the best tool, I will just tell you hands down, that I have ever used for my own productivity, for my own time management, because rarely does anything slip by me because I've got it all sequenced in my calendar, but going backwards rather than starting with today and today I'll do this and next week I'll do that. I actually start backwards and work backwards. So this is a tool that's been very helpful to me. Be accountable to yourself, first of all, and maybe to somebody else, whoever that might be, your supervisor, a friend of yours, a team member that you work with. Be accountable, because when you're accountable, it makes you more determined to get over this. Eat the Frog, little movie on the internet that talks about if the worst thing you have to do tomorrow is eat a live frog, if you get it over with in the morning, nothing worse is going to happen the rest of the day. All that means, in a very disgusting way, is that if you've got something you really, really don't even want to do, but you know you have to, there's no getting around it, get it over with, because everything after that seems like a bonus. And I use this all the time. There are certain pieces that I think, oh, I don't want to do that. But guess what? If I do it, then I get to work on this, which I really enjoy. So eat your frogs and reward yourself. I was reading a blog a year or so ago, and the person writing the blog said, "I don't believe in this reward stuff. You should be able to do this without rewarding yourself." And I thought, "Ha, I don't like that." I work well with rewards. I'm sorry. If my reward happens to be reading a chapter or drinking a cup of coffee, but I'm not allowing myself to do something that pleasurable or personal until I get this finished, that motivates me, folks. So do something that will motivate you. Be aware of unpleasant consequences. Most of us have probably already experienced this to some degree. I didn't get my piece of the project done. Kelly needs it to finish her piece of the project. Somebody else asks her for her part of the project, and she has to say, I don't have Linda's part yet. And those are unpleasant consequences, aren't they? And then realize that rescheduling is not necessarily procrastination. Just again, don't use it as an excuse. But there are times, like the project I'm working on right now, where I have already rescheduled it once by a week because I got in the middle of something else with a client that needed to be done. I'm perfectly okay with that. That's what I'm here for. But I don't want to use it as an excuse to put it off forever. So I gave myself a new deadline to work on. So the next one we're going to talk about is on page 3. And I really, really, really hope you have your handouts in front of you, because, and if you don't, it's okay. I'm not going to read everything on the handouts, but the whole page 3 consists of the interruptions you might be experiencing. So think about that. At the bottom of page 2, it says, consider whether you're using the interruption as an excuse. You know, the candy dish on the desk, and then you have all of those interruptions from other people. It's easy to do that, isn't it? They're inevitable, but you can learn to deal with them. So on page 3, I've given you some specific tips. And because there are so many, I did not put them on slides because I don't want you to have, death by PowerPoint today. So, but I'll just touch on a couple. When the interruption is in person, you can ask somebody when they walk up to you. Now, this wouldn't be something you would ask a patron unless you know it's a chatty patron that you see every week and they talk for 35 minutes or whatever. But ask at the beginning why they've come to see you. And you don't say, why are you here? Or what do you want? That's not how you do it. But what can I do for you? And you might have to circle back to that a time or two if they tend to talk a little too long. Sometimes if they are in your workspace when you stand, that for some reason lessens the time they will spend talking to you if they're interrupting you with something. Or you get up and leave. Not you turn your back on them and walk away, but you get up to go get a drink of water, to have a comfort break, to pull something from the shelf, to file something, whatever. And it's sort of one of those indications that this is going to be a very brief encounter. And sometimes people need that, don't they? They need to be aware that this is going to be a brief encounter. And there are a few other suggestions there for you in person as well. So there are plenty of ways that you can lessen some of those in person interruptions. On the phone, I think that you can come up with some comments you can use. For instance, can I get back to you on that? I'm in the middle of something right now. I have about 5 minutes before I go to a meeting, whatever it might be. You personally can stand during the phone call because it's not that comfortable to stand while you're talking on the phone. And if you tend to get involved in a lengthy conversation that's not necessary, standing will help remind you you need to move this conversation along or have something in front of you that needs done pretty quickly. So it's that constant reminder of, I don't want to be visiting 12 minutes from now because I really need to get moving on this thing that's in front of me. So those are some things you can do if you're on the phone, or even if you're in person, you can use some of those comments. Like, I'm in the middle of something right now. Can I get back to you at a certain time? And then you're kind of in control of that situation, aren't you? Email. I have it highlighted on my own handouts on page 3. Turn off the incoming email alert, like Diana said earlier. Schedule specific times to deal with it, but not your most productive time typically, because there's so much of it that really isn't productive. And I put, keep your email files uncluttered, delete, unsubscribe, delete some more. So just like Diana was saying in her session, be ruthless about that. That can help you capture some of that time that's escaping from you right now. On page 4, another long, lengthy list for you about meetings. If you are in charge of the meetings, I'm going to highlight some things. First of all, if you're not in charge, do you need to attend that meeting? Yes, you were invited, and certainly if it's somebody higher up that expects you to be there, you're going to be there. But let's say you have a weekly meeting with every department and your supervisor just said you could come. What would happen if you figured out after the first 3 meetings that nothing really ever is discussed that you need to be involved in? If you just said to your supervisor, "I'm okay with not coming to that meeting if it's okay with you because I can get some other things done and you can just let me know if there's anything that applies to me." So if you don't need to attend, it won't hurt to have that conversation to see if you could step back from that. Same applies if you're the one running the meeting. Make sure the people you've invited need to be there. Now, don't just cut them off because they'll be offended. So have that conversation with them and say, I realize we've been having you come to these meetings and I'm not sure you even feel like you need to be there. What do you think? I don't want to spend your time on something that's not going to be productive for you. Just saying those things is like a sigh of relief for people because we can be meetinged out, can't we? And especially this past year, because everything we've done for a period of that time was meetinged. And so find out whether you need to be there or whether the people you're inviting actually need to be there. Using an agenda is huge. And when I say agenda, you heard the word in front of that, using it. I have been given an agenda before walking into a meeting. First of all, that's way too late for me. I'm an introvert. I need to process things. So give people the agenda far enough in advance so that if you're going to ask, let's brainstorm a new programming idea, I've had time to think about that. Don't spring it on me right at the meeting because I won't give you any really good information. I need longer than that to process. But the other thing that's happened to me is that I've walked into the room, I've had the agenda, I even got it in advance. And then 15 minutes in, I'm looking at the agenda. I actually said to the person next to me once, "Where are we?" Nothing we were talking about was actually on the agenda. And guess what? We didn't cover the things that were on the agenda that were important because we ran out of time because the agenda wasn't used. So that's huge. And another one I'm a stickler on is starting and ending on time, period. If you end early, that's great as long as everybody's, caught up on who needs to do what and all those kinds of things. But definitely start and end on time and respect people's time. That's part of time management, isn't it? Respecting people's time. I know I'm going quick, but I want to leave a couple of minutes at the end for any questions you have about any of these areas because we're covering quite a few of them. That's why I encourage you to get your handouts. There's a lot more information on there for you. And by the way, on your handouts, you also have my email address. You are welcome to drop me an email, whether that's today or next week or next year. about anything that I talk to you about because I know we can't delve as deeply in any webinar or meeting situation as we can once we've thought it through and questions have come to mind. So please always feel free to reach out to me. And I always, always, always respond. As a matter of fact, I love getting those kinds of emails because it tells me you were listening. That helps my feeling of time management. I managed your time and my time well. So the next one is again for Diana, thanks, but no thanks. I have a whole webinar on saying no, but we really, if we are going to manage our time, we really need to learn how to say no, don't we? So at the top of page 5, I have learned how to say no to things you aren't even good at. I've had people ask me to do programs, and I will say that is not my wheelhouse. I even had a lady tell me once, she said, "But I've got all the information you need." I said, "Yeah, but I don't use that information." And so if anybody asks me any question, I'm going to be out in left field. They'll know I don't really care about what I'm talking about. So I've turned it down, even though it was income for me. Ask yourself and other people, am I the right person for the job? Am I the best person for the job? Who might be? Can you trade that with somebody else? If you give me an Excel spreadsheet to do, I will slog my way through it and get it done for you, but it will not be productive time. Let me just tell you that. If you give me a PowerPoint you want me to design, I can do that because I enjoy doing that. I pull out special artwork. I do as much as I can to make it engaging. And so, okay, let's trade. Hey, Diana, you can do my Excel spreadsheet and I'll do your PowerPoint slides or whatever. So you can trade that sometimes. And here's a really big point. Number 2 on page 5 at the top. If you say yes to something no, something brand new, decide what you're willing to give up to allow for the new task or project or activity. And that's in your personal life or in your professional life. What are you willing to give up? Because you are not going to be able to create more time. Wish we could. Somebody said once, you don't manage time, you manage yourself. But it's all interlocked, isn't it? It's locked together. You have to be able to be aware of both. So if you're taking on something new and the next comment informs that even more, when somebody gives you an estimate of how long that will take, double it before you decide if you have the time. I don't know about you. If it's something brand new, it's always going to take more time than they said it would because I'm not familiar with it. So double it and think to yourself, well, that should take about an hour. Well, I'm going to allow 2 hours. Do I have 2 hours in my schedule this week? No, I do not. So what's the answer? The answer is no. And you don't have to give a lot of excuses, a lot of reasons, a lot of rationalizations for why you're saying no. You can say something very kind like, I wish I could help. It's not going to fit my schedule right now. You don't even have to say the but because the but makes it sound like it's not meaningful. I wish I could help. It's not going to fit in my schedule right now. So that little tiny word is a huge piece of your time management. So you see the question on the screen. What might you consider saying no to? Can you think of something? Go ahead and type it in the chat box. I want you to become aware before we end our session today of something you can take a step on. What might you say no to? I didn't say you have to, but you'll at least consider it. And I will tell you that once you do this, you can develop the habit not to be mean, not to be selfish, but you become so aware of what works for you and what doesn't that when it's time to say no, it doesn't feel like you're letting somebody down, you're failing, whatever. Marissa said, more committees. You got it. Oh my goodness. We could committee ourselves to death, could we not? We can committee ourselves to the point where we don't have time to work. And that's not good for our time management. So then you have to kind of cull it, don't you? And sort through it and say, Marissa, you can just look at the list of committees you have an opportunity to serve on. That was one of the things I think Catherine mentioned this morning was committees might be one of your goals, but you want to make sure it's a committee that's going to grow you or that you're going to be able to contribute significantly to, not just that they want a warm body. I don't know about you, but I have been drawn into committees before where they just needed another warm body at the table. And I sensed it as soon as I was there and I got out of it as soon as I could. Not because I'm selfish, but because I didn't feel like I was actually doing anything meaningful. And Diana said, meetings or small unexpected projects. Yeah, it's just not worth it, is it? Because just saying that in the chat, I can hear the stress in your voices, and you didn't even speak out loud, but I can hear the stress that that brings on to you. So be careful. Committees are wonderful, meetings are wonderful, but they need to be things that are actually meaningful in your life or in your work life. So, one little step when you leave here today for any of these areas. So, think about this. We've talked about procrastination, we have talked about interruptions, we've talked about meetings, and we've talked about saying no. What is something very specific now? Because if you're not specific, remember we talked about that in Catherine's session. If you're not specific, it's not going to get done. So, what specifically can you do about procrastination or interruptions or meetings or saying no? See, I told you I had a lot packed in here today, but this all is so integral to time management skills. So type into the chat box and we still have a couple of minutes. So also take this time. What questions do you have for me? What's one specific thing that I've touched on, but maybe haven't delved deeply enough? And maybe it's too deep to even delve here. You can always drop me that email I mentioned. I want to be good time manager of your time today. Marissa said, I really like the working backward in your calendar method. I'm telling you, Marissa, it was a lifesaver for me. I've been doing it for 20 years. And nothing I do, and I do a lot of different kinds of things to help me with that, but nothing I do serves me better than working backward in my calendar. And it never fails me, ever. Which I kind of like that, don't you? If you have a tool or a tip that never fails you. So I highly suggest giving that a try. Somebody said to me once, yeah, but you're setting fake deadlines and you'll know and you'll just overlook them. I said, then that's on you. And that's a choice you're making to disappoint yourself and to put pressure on yourself. I am not willing to do that. If I have the tool in hand, which is my calendar, and I can work backward and I can put those dates on there, that is just as big a commitment to me as when I make a commitment to Kelly about doing a program for her. There's no difference in my mind. Heather said, schedule my due dates earlier because something always happens. Exactly, Heather. It's exactly what we're talking about, isn't it? It might be a few years ago, I was scheduled to do a program and I had an emergency appendectomy at 3 o'clock in the morning, the day before I was supposed to do something. I had it done and I didn't have to worry about it. Now, I did have to reschedule a program because I was in the hospital, but the thing that I had planned to do that day, I already knew it needed to be done by that day. So it was already finished. And it could be something really simple, like one of your kids gets sick, or a staff member gets sick, or whatever it might be, or the mayor comes to town and you have to entertain that person, or whatever. But you're right, something always happens. And Marcia said, interruptions by my supervisors when in the middle, it's hard to interrupt them, especially if they're in classes, meetings, or the web. Yes, it is. And so have that conversation, Marcia, and just say, it's really challenging to interrupt you. How should I handle this? It's okay to ask supervisors how they want you to handle something, because I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to make sure we've got all the answers, and nobody really does. Marissa said, how do you manage when we need to use multiple calendars for work? Like if we work better with a physical calendar, but your work uses Outlook, etc. Okay. I had a little example of this when my husband, I only use one calendar now, but when my husband was going through cancer treatment, he went through 62 radiation treatments, 7 chemo treatments, all the doctor treatments, all the test treatments, and I had work. And so did he. He was teaching college. And I actually did have 2 calendars at that time, and one calendar was his medical calendar, and that's all that was on there. So before I did anything on my work calendar, I checked his medical calendar first. Vice versa, if the doctor said I need to make this appointment for a certain day, I checked my work calendar because those things typically can't be rescheduled. So that just gives you a little snippet of that, Marissa. But if I needed to do that, and I've thought of that before, I'm very fortunate that I from that standpoint, that I work alone and I don't have to use a calendar. I do use Outlook calendar to remind me of meetings and things like that, but it's already on my physical calendar. So if you can, try to figure out a way to sync the two. The personal calendar, I would try to put that combined with your work calendar if you can, just because when you get too many, you forget to look. I have a friend who put everything on her phone, and she actually missed a training that she was assigned because she had put it on her phone, but she didn't put it down anywhere else. And the client, I can't tell you, was very upset about that. So try to figure out a way to get it down to 2 if you can, Marissa. I know that might not be possible. And if you want to drop me an email and we can talk about that further, maybe some thoughts will bubble up to the top of my mind that I can help you with that too. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to be mindful of your time, but you know that doing the same thing over and over again is the definition of insanity if you're expecting different results, because it's not going to happen. Diana said, I keep multiple calendars within Google. There you go. They overlay or can be viewed separately. Yes, that would be helpful too. Yes, absolutely. I'm a paper calendar person. I have it color coded. I grab for it. I take it everywhere I go. If I actually have written in the front of it that there's a reward if I've lost it. Because I mean, I have those things all someplace else because I have checklists for things that need to be done and so forth. But yeah, you do whatever you need to do. So if you need me, just reach out. I'm here. I'll be happy to help in any way I can. Thank you, everybody. Hope to see some of you at the work-life balance session in 15 minutes.